Okay.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Does that work?
Yep.
Sweet.
Hello.
Hey, Lance, how are you?
Good. How's it going, man?
Going well, man.
I finally got my hat today, bro. Been 2 months and
Oh,
so too.
man. The most expensive hat that ever was.
Wearing it proud today, baby.
Yeah, man.
So I got Gabe's bio here. If I think Jesse and I thought that as an introduction, or what? What do you think?
Man, you can, but your internet is doing its
You want me to do his introduction?
yeah.
All right. This is going to be hilarious.
Is it not working out good, or?
No. Well, it is now. It's like in and out. You know how your internet goes.
I know. I'm straight on my phone, and I had a Zoom earlier. It was the best one I've had, dude. So I'm just using my ring light in my phone now. It seems to be working a lot better, but totally understandable.
Yeah.
What's up, guys?
What's up, man?
Yeah, I'm stoked, man. Gabe had shared it with a bunch, like some of his groups too, and
Awesome.
this would be good, man. A lot of value add to the group, you know.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
All of his stuff has been owner finance, basically.
I know. Am I supposed to be on video or audio, or am I in the wrong
What's
place
up,
here?
dude? What's
No,
up, Dylan?
this is a sub 2 meeting, Dylan. I had no idea. That's why this
Yeah.
is hilarious. I thought it was just Gabe, but I didn't know it was a sub 2 meeting. Oh,
I don't even know.
It's kind of the sub 2. We started the group, so
Okay, yeah, I don't even know who's
it's open to
group it was.
anybody though. This group is open to anybody.
Yeah, man, you should give us an intro because I just saw Lance and Gabe, and I was like, cool, I'll go to whatever this is. So I'm not even sure what this meeting is.
Yeah.
So is it it's a sub 2 group you guys started then?
Yeah. It's a sub 2, I guess, creative, think tank that we started. Yeah. After the PACES multifamily challenge. I was a sub 2 leader. And so I tried to jump in and started, and it's just continually, trying to bring as much value as we can to people in the obvious just creative finance space, but now in multifamily and learning. Yeah. It's a constant battle to learn,
All about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that I'll keep admitting people. I guess come 5 o'clock, maybe we'll get people streaming in, but I'll probably be admitting people most of the meeting.
Yeah, we had like 18 said they were going just on our page alone. So
Do you guys want us to do it with audio and camera off? Whoever's hosting it?
Oh,
I think Damon, you can mute everyone, right? When it gets started, or
yeah.
okay. Cool.
I think first I have to figure out how to mute everyone. That's
Right.
That's a
figuring
good
out
idea.
Zoom is the hardest part.
Yeah, there's always some jag off in the background with his kid screaming or a dog barking.
Yeah.
I'll 100% be that person if given the opportunity to.
Hey, we didn't turn the dogs off when he was talking to Brandon Turner.
I know. How fun was that, man? Talking to Brandon Turner. That was badass.
That was such a trip, man. That was just
That's so
fun,
cool.
dude. It was like a giddy 12-year-old kid.
Yeah.
He knows I'm real. He knows I'm real.
Yeah. Well, Gabe's really pushing me to talk to Dylan. So I was like, oh, that's all.
Yeah, man. I appreciate Gabe for that so much. And then all the people that reached out after, I was so surprised. I didn't expect anyone to listen or care. And then I had a lot of people reach out, and that was really, really fun getting to meet some people.
Nice.
Yeah, so I guess as soon as Gabe comes in, I'll just mute all, and then Lance, I'll unmute you. You know, you can give introduction and
Awesome.
stuff.
And there he
There he
is.
is.
What
There's a
up?
man. What's
There
up,
he
Gabriel?
is.
How are you, man?
Hey, hey.
I recognize a lot of faces, a lot of names.
Absolutely.
Hi, Gabe.
Hello, hello.
Hey, man.
Okay, so Gabe, real quick, I'm gonna mute all, and then I'm gonna obviously like unmute you, unmute Lance, and I guess we'll get going.
Cool. Sounds good to me.
Okay, guys. Hey, thanks for showing up. I wanted to introduce my personal friend and mentor to you, Gabriel Hamel. He lives in Eugene, Oregon with his wife and 2 kids. Gabe had prioritized a few important things in his life: family, health, happiness, and building wealth through real estate. In 2005, at 23 years old, a year after returning home from the Iraq War in the United States Army, Gabe purchased his first single-family property. He purchased another one in 2006 and another in 2007. At this point, he recognized the power of real estate in his life and spent 2009 to present using no and low money down creative financing techniques to invest in small and medium sized multifamily properties, mobile home parks, commercial real estate. And today his real estate portfolio is valued at a whopping 50 million plus, consisting of nearly 450 multifamily mixed use mobile home parks and commercial units. And yeah, Gabe believes real estate, like most business, is a relationship business. To date, every real estate transaction he has ever been involved in says he can trace back to either conversation or relationship built. Thanks,
Yes,
Gabe.
sir. Nice intro there, Lance. Appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
And hey, Gabe, I'll just start off by telling you I'm an Army vet as well, man. I appreciate you. Thank you very much for coming in and talking with everyone. And I much like you, after the military, man, I ended up an injured vet. I came home. I'm 100% disabled vet, but I was a homeless vet for 4.5 years. So
Oh, well.
your story is an absolute inspiration to me, man. And I look up to guys like you. So
Well, I appreciate it, and thanks for your service. Thanks for your service as well.
I'll let you take it away, Gabe. I think, we have a span of people in the room, some obviously with some knowledge, with some background, and then we have, some that are absolute newbies.
Yeah.
And I'd like you to just take us on your journey, right? If you could, from the beginner that didn't know anything getting into it, maybe to where you are now. And if you could look at it from a perspective of, if you knew then what you know now,
Sure.
how you might do it.
Yeah. I'll try to condense a long story short, but we'll go back to high school. So, the 2 things that kept me in school were high school wrestling and the social aspect of school. I'm amazed that I passed high school. I think each year I did less and less and somehow got better grades, but I learned how to work that system. And, oftentimes in school, I was like, how does this apply to real life? This doesn't make sense, right? And so that was kind of the beginning of that. And a couple years after high school, like I'm sure a lot of you, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. So that's like 2002. I'd done a bunch of odd end jobs up between high school, and I actually joined the Army National Guard and infantry unit while in high school. And so I was doing the 1 week in a month thing. I graduated high school, some odd end jobs for a couple of years. And then 2002, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I was like, this shit makes sense. This is the first thing I read that made sense. I actually never finished a book or even read a book fully until Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I used to be embarrassed to say it, but I'm at this point glad that was the first book I read word for word, cover to cover. It just made sense. It was the first thing I read where I'm like, this actually makes sense and to what I want to do with my life. I didn't know what that was going to look like initially. I just knew that I didn't want to go to college. I didn't want to go work for someone else. I didn't want to go have a job for the rest of my life and work till I'm old and retire when I was too old and to enjoy it. I saw that most people work jobs that they didn't enjoy, that didn't give them financial freedom, didn't give them time freedom. I just wanted something different. So that's 02. 03, I get deployed. I come back in 04, and I was just dead set. I mean, that I was going to come back and buy a property. So I was living in my friend's attic for $100 a month before the deployment. And I told all my friends, I'm going to come back and I'm going to start buying real estate. And as some of you have heard the story many times, most of those guys are like, you're an idiot, man. You're living in a friend's attic for $100 a month. You've never gone to college. Like, what the hell are you talking about? How are you going to do that? And, my answer was always like, I don't know. I don't know how, but I'm going to. There's people that buy real estate and they become millionaires, and that's my plan. And so, I come back in 2004, got out in 05. And so 2005, that's when banks were just giving money to anybody. And so 05, I bought my first house. It was the only bank loans, the only purchases I've ever done with bank loans, or at least initially, are those first 3 properties are in the subprime. So no money down in 05, bought a house, rented out 2 of the rooms. Now it's referred to as house hacking, just made good sense back then. Similar in 06, another one in 07. Then 2008, I went back to the bank and said, hey, I'm going to buy another house. And they said, slow down, guidelines have changed. You actually need money in a down payment, none of which I had. And I said, why would I need that? I never needed that before. I've bought in these 3 houses. I've made payments on time every month. And they're basically said, we don't care. You need to put a bunch of money down. You need to have a job. You need to have a large down payment. I didn't have that. And so I spent a year looking, every night. I had a minimum wage job. I looked every night on Craigslist, just typing in keywords like seller financing, owner financing, seller terms, all the for sale by owners. And I just made phone calls to potential sellers and sellers. And about a year into that, 2009, bought my first seller finance property. It was 2 duplexes side by side, and it cash flowed almost to the dollar that I was making at my job at the time. And so finished out that year working and spent the rest of 2009 through 13 buying all small multifamily properties, no money down seller financing.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I mean, it's almost an unbelievable journey to me, right? Because it much kind of matched my journey, except the way that I did it was a much longer road. It seems like you really condensed and you really were honed in and knew exactly what you want to do, or knew what you wanted to do. And I think one of the things that interests me the most about your story is it seems like you were self-taught along the way. I mean, you just went in, started buying properties, but as you started coming into the multifamily space, how did you start to teach yourself the underwriting, looking at the deals, how to frame up creative deals?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I didn't know a lot. I knew that, all right, real estate, a house, property, it's an asset. I'm going to buy assets. It was like basic Rich Dad Poor Dad. Like, I understood, all right, there's liabilities, all this stuff that I don't actually need. It's not going to build wealth. It's not going to make me money. And I can buy property. That's an asset. It kicks off cash flow. Eventually you have enough cash flow you can live off of, and you hold the property long enough, the equity is going to be there, right? And so you didn't have things back then like Bigger Pockets and all these podcasts and stuff. And so, self-taught in a way, but a lot of the learning was just by doing. And some of that was also by talking and learning from the sellers. And so, like I said, I spent a year looking and analyzing deals. I spent a year talking to sellers, and I found that some wanted large down payments. Some, it was a specific interest rate. Some it was, the down payment that was important to them. And so because I spent that time talking to those sellers, what I found is those sellers that wanted to carry financing, they were investors themselves. And so I wasn't going in there with all this knowledge of how to buy real estate. I was going in there just asking questions, hey, how come you're selling the property? I would ask just really basic questions, and they were teaching me. And so after I had done a few seller finance deals, I did think, this is amazing. In fact, I had closed this deal. I walked away from the table with like a $2,500 check, And I was like, what the hell just happened? Like I just made money at closing. I later realized it was because of the deposits and the prorated rents, and it was a no money down deal. So, and they're thanking me for buying their house. And I'm going, they're thanking me. I walked away with a check. I just got this, free property. But what I found is a lot of these sellers, all these sellers that I bought from with the no money down and the low money down seller financing through the years, they were investors themselves. So it wasn't me going and educating them and telling them, hey, here's the advantage of carrying financing, or here's why you should sell me the property. I was just going to sellers that wanted to carry financing and finding out what was most important to them and structuring the deal, giving them what was important to them and still making it work for me. Now I was fortunate that I didn't have money. And I say fortunate because it forced me to be creative. And back then, my only criteria was the property was cash flow positive. I didn't know what a cap rate was. I'm not even sure if I knew what cash on cash was back then, but I did know that if I brought no money down, that's an infinite return. So how do you calculate the cash on cash on that? That return's infinite. So I had nothing to lose. And there was no plan B, right? I didn't have a backup plan. And so I structured it to where worst case scenario, I buy these properties, I create cash flow, I create terms that create cash flow, and I own real estate. If the way it was structured, if I were ever to default on the properties, which I never did, never missed a payment, never had to give a property back, worst case scenario, they would get the property back at the end of the term. And so I really focused on properties that were poorly managed, under rented. Some of these had deferred maintenance. And again, my only criteria was cash flow positive. I sometimes get asked what kind of reserves I had in the bank. I didn't have anything in the bank, right? I was just making this shit up as I went. And was I scared not to have reserves in the bank? No, because what was the worst thing that could happen? It was more risky to not do the deal than, it was riskier to not do the deal and all the what ifs that could happen than just buying the deal and creating wealth, which is what did happen.
Yeah. So let's go back to your very first deal in multifamily. And can you just walk us through, what that looked like, right? Because I see everybody as they get into multifamily, they're like, man, I got to go out and get 50 units or 20 units. And sometimes I tell people, well, it's just better to start at 5, just look for the small deal and work your way out from there. Because I find as you get into the bigger deals, the underwriting gets maybe more labor intensive, and so I guess the premise is work your way small, or start from small and work your way big.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a right way, right? Like I've been asked that before. Like if I would go back, would I do it the same? Would I do anything different? I don't know. I mean, I met a guy once that did 175 unit on his first deal, his first real estate deal ever, right? He's extremely successful. So I don't think there's a right way. And for me, when I've gotten into bigger deals, it wasn't until I allowed my mind to believe that I was capable of doing bigger deals. Bigger deals aren't really any more complicated. And in fact, in some ways, I would argue that the larger the deal, the easier, depending on the type of property. And so I think for me, I was focused on multifamily and small multifamily because that's what my mind allowed me to believe I was capable of at the time. And then, I remember doing, when I did my first 11 unit place, it wasn't until in my mind, I was like, yeah, you know what? I should do 10 units. Like that'll be a goal this year. I'm going to do a 10 unit property. That deal wasn't really any harder. It was just allowing myself to believe that. And so, with these original small multifamily properties, a lot of times the focus was just these were poorly managed, under rented, some deferred maintenance. They had the upside, but I didn't rely on the upside, which I think is an important piece, right? I mentioned that it had to be cash flow positive. That's how I hedged my risk. So I wasn't going and saying, hey, this property works if I can get the rents up. This property works if I can, clean them up and sell it for more. Even though almost everything I buy has some kind of upside, I really don't rely on that upside. And that's how I really hedge my risk going into any property.
Awesome. Yeah. So then that brings me to, in terms of structuring creative deals, right? I being in Pace's program and the whole sub 2 thing, we try to center around that, but I feel like it's kind of an ever moving battle to learn more about how to structure these deals. And kind of in a deal that we just recently were structuring, we were really figuring out maybe how to back the seller out without paying capital gains tax or as much capital gains tax. And so just a brief, like as the deal looked, you had a current loan in place, going to seller finance the rest. But we were thinking that, we could do a subject to on the existing loan, seller finance the rest, bring down the overall asking price, and then try to back him out with a down payment, with a, paying little to no capital gains tax. Can you tell me how you look at structuring something like that, where you're trying to, get the owner out on the most advantageous deal that you can in terms of like capital gains and.
Yeah, the capital gains piece is interesting, especially for the seller, right? Because it was something I learned along the way, because I was trying to figure out why do sellers want to even carry financing for you? So a lot of my initial deals, most of my early stuff leading up until about 2013 or so, these properties were all free and clear. And so there was no subject to, it wasn't a land sale contract. I wasn't wrapping any kind of loan. This was a straight, the seller would take a note and trust deed. And so rather than making my mortgage payments to the bank, making it to Wells Fargo or Bank of America, I was making those payments directly to the seller. And it was note and trust deed. It was recorded just like it would if you were to get a bank loan. I have done since then some subject to type stuff. But initially it was just note and trust deeds, and it was pretty simple. At the time, a lot of those deals, they were 5-year terms. The interest rates were interest only. I like the interest only because you're not paying a lot towards the principal in those first couple of years anyway. It allowed me to cash flow more. And the interest rate was slightly above market interest. And so I thought that was, because one of the questions I get asked a lot are, what are typical seller financing terms? And I don't think there's any typical terms. And I think the more you know about what the seller's wants are, the more you can structure the deal towards that. And so I did think that was kind of typical, because those first couple of deals, they were all 5-year terms, interest rate was slightly above market, and they were all interest only. And I thought that was typical. And then I did a deal where this couple was in their late 70s. They carried 30 years fully amortized. And when I asked them why they carried 30 years fully amortized, I wasn't putting a date on how long they were going to live. I just knew statistically, they were closer to 80 than 70. I didn't think likely they would live to 110. I said, why are you carrying 30 years fully amortized? And they said, we just want to check for the rest of our life. And when we die, we don't want to pass the property to our adult children who know nothing about real estate or about houses. We want to pass the note to them. And so, they structured it. I make my monthly payments till to this day. It's just on auto pay to their trust. When they die, that payment's going to keep going, and the trustee of that trust will keep getting that payment. And that's how they set it up. And that was the deal that made me realize I don't actually know what a seller wants unless I ask. And I have multiple stories on why a seller would structure a certain way. And a big one, kind of circling back to your question about the capital gains, is that's a big reason why sellers will carry finance. They, a lot of these sellers, they're at a place in their investing career and their investing cycle where they don't want to be cashed out. Not every seller wants to be cashed out, because then they have a money problem. Now, it's a good money problem, but they have to put it somewhere. They have to go put that cash into another deal. And a lot of these investors that are in their 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, they don't want to go actively invest. So that even though there's a 1031 opportunity, they don't want to go actively invest and put their money into a deal. A lot of these sellers have self-managed, they're tired, they're burnt out, amazing people. They're just tired landlords. They don't want to be cashed out and pay capital gains. They don't want to go put it in the stock market. They're looking for a new level of passivity. And so by them carrying financing, you're creating that new level of passivity for them. So that's the win, is the passivity, the not paying all the capital gains at once, them not having to actively go invest. And the win for you as the buyer is you're able to be so much more creative with the deal. Unlike going to a bank where the bank says, this is how much you put down, this is the interest rate, these are the terms, you qualify or not, take it or leave it, right? With the seller financing, it's really as creative as you and the seller can get. And sellers know that. I mean, sellers that want to carry financing, they know the advantage. I don't spend my time talking or convincing a seller into carrying financing ever. I focus on finding sellers that want to carry financing, finding out what's most important to them, and then trying to make the deal work.
Cool. So we got a question from the group. Does he cold call or have BAs cold call sellers that are free and clear? How often does he prospect before he secures a seller finance for multifamily? So for example, his KPIs basically?
Yeah, so I'm a little more, yeah, it's a good question. I see Lance wrote networking, building relationships. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how I was going to answer. Like I'm a lot more free flowing like that. I take a little more of a holistic approach to investing, but my focus, and I will say this over and over, it's building relationships and having conversations. It's every single deal that I've ever done, from my very first deal to my most recent deal to the deal I'm in contract on, it is 100% relationships and conversations. It fits for me. It fits my personality. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy talking with people. I enjoy meeting people. I enjoy having conversations. I enjoy building genuine relationships. We may meet and maybe we're acquaintances. Maybe we become good friends. Maybe we do a deal together. I don't care either way. I don't have, I don't go into it trying to get anything out of the relationship. I go into it with a genuine curiosity of who you are. Now, sometimes that leads to great real estate deals. And I can give a few examples of that if you'd like. But there's not one right way. I mean, I know I have an investor friend in Seattle. Every single one of her deals is through a wholesaler. Every single one. That works for her. I know people that they send out thousands of mailers every month. That works for them. Or the auto phone calls or the text. That's not me, but it works for a lot of people. I focus on building relationships, and in return, that turns into a lot of deal flow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I often say, if you're in real estate and you don't want to talk to people, you may be in the wrong business. Like this is an absolute business of people knowing each other. And me being an agent here in the Houston, Texas area, I'm constantly reaching out and talking to people. So that would kind of bring me to another question. So do you focus more, and that might be a loaded question, but do you focus more towards off market or on market? I mean, I've also often heard Vinaghetti say, at this point in her career, she knows all the brokers, she talks to them, she's on their list. Are you much the same? Are you talking with more brokers now at this point? Find it even?
Yeah, it's a mix. So a lot of that early stuff was off market. I still like off market stuff. I still like when brokers bring me a deal or show me a property before it goes active. So when I say relationships, sometimes it's agents and brokers. Sometimes it is just people in and around my circle, right? And it's not always direct, right? I mean, when I started, I knew nobody in real estate, no one in business, nobody with money. But as I started having more conversations, it's most people, they live in a property, they know somebody that's investing, I was telling a friend this a while back, and he started talking to a neighbor about how he wanted to invest in real estate. And he's like, I've known this guy for 8 years, and he finds out the guy owns 12 investment properties. He didn't know that till he opened his mouth and said, hey, I want to start investing. And so it doesn't matter if it's, agents, brokers, or people, what I want is I want to be on the front of people's mind when they think about selling a property. Maybe at the time, here's a good example where I didn't buy the property, but I had an old classmate reach out after like 20 years. We weren't super close, but he knew, he was following me online and knew I was investing in real estate. And he brought me a 58 units that his dad was going to sell in Eugene. Now, there wasn't terms that we could agree on, but I was able to look at that, see the financials, analyze the deal before anybody else saw it. And it's because he knew that I was buying in that neighborhood. Now it didn't work for both to complete the deal, but being able to have the opportunity to look at those 58 units and make an offer before anyone else saw it, that's what I want. One of the best examples I can give, and I shared this this morning with Kyle, who I see is on this call. There was a developer in town who was building a bunch of campus properties in early 2010, 11, 12. And I'm just like, who the hell is this guy? I wanted to know what his story was. And I reached out, and he was gracious enough to share a story about how he got into developing properties. He was buying a lot of multifamily stuff in the 70s. And then there was a lot of incentives to develop. And so he developed, but we stayed in contact. It's not like we became best friends. We just stayed in touch. And almost a decade later, he said, hey, a buddy of mine's selling a single family home the next town over. And at the time I was like, I'm not buying single family anymore at all. I wouldn't even look at single family at the time. And so, and I had just bought my first mobile home park. And so I told him that. I said, hey, I'm not looking at single family. I'm really focused in the mobile home park space right now. And he's like, that's interesting. He goes, I own 4 parks. And I said, well, do you want to sell any? And he's like, yeah, I would. And I said, would you sell or finance it? He said, yeah, I would. that ended up being a 2% down deal. It was a 200% cash on cash deal. Well, for one, I bought it for 820 and appraised out at 2.3 million 2 years later. So the reason, now this is a sophisticated investor, but his focus is developing A-class apartments. And so even though he was a sophisticated investor, I got a killer deal on this mobile home park because for one, we had that trust, we had that relationship. So he didn't need a large down payment. He had enough taxable income that year. He already knew, like, and trust me from our conversation. So that's another reason he didn't want a large down payment. And he wanted to give terms that worked because he knew at the end of the day, the deal had to make sense. But I didn't walk into his office 10 years before that thinking, hey, I'm going to buy mobile home parks from this guy. Mobile home parks weren't on my radar. I had no idea, that this guy owned or was going to own any. It just came down to, I had a genuine interest, and a decade later, that turned into a phenomenal deal. Now he has 3 other parks he's not selling, but who is he going to call when he is interested in selling those? He's going to call me first. Now, maybe by the time he does it, I'm not buying parks, but at least I'm the first one that gets to see that before it goes to market. And that's what I want.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so I guess let's talk about when you're writing the deal. So you find a deal, you like the deal. What are the numbers that you look for that kind of make you say, hey, this is a good deal for me?
Yeah, it depends, because right now I'm really shifting. Like the last couple of years, I've been buying, like I said, mobile home parks, and so I'm looking at that a little differently. But again, I'm looking at properties that are poorly managed, under rented. That's a big part of it. But it just comes down to how I'm going to finance it, whether it's seller financing, private money, hard money, a combination of both. I mean, in some ways, in reality, I'm in my entire portfolio, no real money out of pocket because of how I started. So even when I'm putting money down on a deal, it's usually coming from a sale of a property or private funds or the cash that I pulled out of another property. And so when I input money and I'm looking at I want a high cash on cash, but again, like I want the property to pencil today. I don't rely on that upside. I don't have a specific metric that, I need this property to be X dollars per door, or I mentioned that 200% cash on cash deal. Well, people say, is that typical? The same year I did a 10% cash on cash deal, but it was a phenomenal deal. That 10% down came from a single family that I sold that was a no money down deal initially. And that park I bought for 1.3 and appraised at 2.77. I was able to pull out a bunch of tax-free money at like 4%. So 10% cash on one deal, 200% cash on cash on the other. They were both phenomenal deals. It just came down to the deal structure and how they were financed that made them good deals.
Yeah, an absolute no-brainer. Can you talk about why you're looking kind of towards the mobile home space right now?
Yeah, I like that space for a lot of reasons. I've also shifted towards commercial, industrial, out of state. A lot of my stuff's in Oregon, the majority of my stuff. But I like the mobile home park space. For one, I think it's a space that, now it's pretty frothy. The last few years have been frothy because you got guys like Brandon Turner yapping his mouth about mobile home parks, and everyone wants to buy a mobile home park now. But I was looking to move into larger multifamily, and I just saw that the returns, the cap rates were being condensed down to nothing. And I was looking at how can I get a better return? And I started looking in the mobile home park space, and I found that there's a lot of parks that were just poorly managed and under rented. Rents hadn't been increased in years, utilities weren't being built back. So my first park was kind of proof of concept in early 2019. The utilities weren't being built back. That $15,000 a year. Spread out over the 40-something tenants. It was a small impact on the tenants, but it was an instant savings of $15,000. The rents hadn't been increased in 4.5 years on that one. Bumping the rents up, it added $15,000 to the revenue. So, that by building the utilities back, small rent increase, that first park added $30,000 to the NOI without spending $1. My property manager sent out a notice. 6 months later, sent out another notice and increased the NOI by $30,000 without spending any money. And I was like, wow, that's hard to do in multifamily. In multifamily, whether it's, you got to wait till tenants move out or a big rehab project and have it be capital extent, it takes the money. And so for me, I just really liked that model. And so to this day, that's what I'm looking for in the mobile home park space. Are rents below what market should be? Can I build back utilities? Now I still base it on what's currently going on there. I analyze the deal, I underwrite it of the current financials, and then I actualize the upside. I just don't rely on the upside.
Well, man, if you're buying here in Texas, I might have an interesting deal I might want to talk with you about.
Sounds good to me.
I got a guy who owns like 7 mobile home parks, and I just couldn't figure out how to make it work.
Well, let's buy all of them. I'd want to buy all of them.
Yeah, exactly. So I got a question here. So since cash on cash is your main objective, do you have a preference between using private money lenders versus equity partners, and why?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I don't have very many partners on my property. I do have some partners. I don't like to give equity away unless I want to, or I choose to, or they bring something to the table. So I prefer private money and hard money. I have a great relationship. Going back to, again, relationships, I have a great relationship with a local private money lender. They have lent me millions and millions of dollars on deals throughout the years. But that's come with me showing them and proving to them that I have a great track record and doing what I say. So I walked into that hard money lender's office years and years before I ever asked to borrow money, just so they knew who I was. And then, we stayed in contact. And so I started building that relationship and building a track record. So when it came time to borrow hard money, they at least already knew who I was. It wasn't just some stranger off the street saying, hey, I have a deal. And they're like, who the hell are you? And hey, can I borrow $1 million? And then for private money, again, going to relationships, the very first private money lender that I've ever had, when I initially did all those seller financing deals, 09 through 13, I refinanced into long-term debt in 2014. And one of the ladies had a pretty big payoff because she was financing multiple properties for me. And I've shared this with a lot of people, so half you probably know this story, but she said, what am I going to do with all this money? And I said, I don't know, you could lend it back to me. And she kind of laughed and we got off the phone. And then a couple months later, I was in contract on a property. I had an offer in for cash. I was going to get a hard money loan on it. And she called back and said, hey, were you serious about lending you some money? And I said, absolutely. Now, I had never borrowed private money at the time, and she had never lent private money. But what we had is 6 years of trust. And she had lent me, she had carried financing on millions of dollars worth of real estate. And I had made my payments on time every month. And back then I used to hand deliver my check to her every single month to have that FaceTime. So she entrusted me with $1 million worth of real estate. I kept my word and make payments on time every single month. So when she got cashed out, who was she going to lend that to? She was very happy to lend it to me. It was a win for her. She got more mailbox money, and I had capital to go buy more real estate. And so I haven't actively sought private money, but that was how that first private money came to be.
Can you expand a little bit more? Again, man, going back to that deal that I had, it was unique. We had 2 foundation structure homes on one side and 5 mobile homes on the other. And initially I didn't know a whole lot about creative finance. And so when I went into it, this guy wanted $300,000. I couldn't figure out how to make that loan work. If you were looking at something like that, how are you going to go about a deal like that? Because the way that I have thought about it, well, I'm going to survey one side with the homes and then have the other, and try to get a normal loan on the side with the 2 foundation homes. So if you could if you were looking at a deal like that, talk about how you might structure the private money and the hard money and how you might go after it.
Yeah, I think every deal is a little unique in and of itself, but at the end of the day, it just comes down to, does the financing support the deal? So it doesn't matter if someone goes and gets a bank loan, seller financing, a combination of seller financing and private money, hard money, whatever the combination of the financing is, it has to support the deal. And going back to earlier in the call when I mentioned it has to pencil today, there's a lot of deals I buy where there is massive upside. But when I look at that, so the deal you're talking about, without knowing the specifics, I would still want it to work the way it sits. Now, that's not how everybody invests. That's just how I hedge my downside. 11 years ago, I met a whole bunch of investors that kind of invested before and after 2008. And all the ones that lost their shit in 08 were the ones that were banking on appreciation. Mm. Every deal I did was bank, and some guys were small, some were big, some had thousands of units, but they were focusing on, for the deal to work, it had to increase in value. For the deal to work, I don't know your deal specific, but if I subdivide this and do that, then the deal works. If I can increase rent, the deal works. Now I can almost always actualize that, but regardless of how you finance it, the deal needs to support that financing at the end of the day. And a really easy example, I bought this little fourplex and I got hard money on it. it was way under rented. It was rents were almost half of what market should be. So I paid $475 for the property. I put $50K down, got a hard money loan. The hard money loan supported the $475 purchase price with the current rents, even though it was 50% below market. So when those leases expired and I got tenants in there, and I put less than, I think I put like $8,000 into the property over that year and a half. So not a lot, just some cosmetic exterior paint, some minor stuff. But once those got up to market, and because commercial property is based on the NOI, that property appraised out less than 2 years later at $860, right? Because commercial is based on the NOI, not on comps, not on, you know, what someone is emotionally like, oh my gosh, I love this property, I have to live here, I'm gonna pay a stupid amount more to own it. And that was when I realized the power of, like, for one, commercial real estate, because they base it on NOI, not on emotion and comps. But the other part was, what if that didn't happen? What if I couldn't increase rents? What if I wasn't able to refinance it? The property still worked the way it sat by paying $475 for it. Now, maybe someone else would have come along and paid $750 and been like, oh, I can get the rents up, I can and refi and do all this. Even though I knew that was likely, I still didn't put myself in a position to have to rely on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because at the end of the day, the cash flow, the cash flow, I guess, if where the deal sits, the cash flow works. It makes sense all day long.
Yeah, the other part with cash flow, it's interesting because, you can build a lot of wealth and equity, and I've always said, hey, cash flow first, cash flow first, cash flow first. Now, when I look back on the last however many years, it's the cash flow is what has allowed me to hold the property. Now, the wealth has been built in long-term appreciation, right? And that equity, but it's the cash flow that's allowed me to hold properties for a long period of time. And so at a certain point, like it's why I don't get in the flipping game, right? You're exchanging cash for an asset back to cash, and then you have a money problem. You're like, well, I have to go put this somewhere, deploy this somewhere to get a return. Buy and hold real estate, you hold it until you're in a position where there's enough equity to go, okay, maybe it does make sense for me to move this equity into a larger deal. So a good example, in 2020, I sold 2 of my single family homes, but it was because there was a lot of equity in each property. But it was the cash flow that allowed me I bought these in 05 and 06, I think, 05 and 06. But it was the cash flow that allowed me to hold them all the way until 2020 to say, okay, now it makes more sense to sell these, use that equity to put down on a larger, bigger property. And so I didn't want to be in the position of buying it, holding it, having to sell it the next year for the deal to work.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. So for you, with where you're at now, what about moving into the future? So are you going to be, the YouTube influencer that, you start to build on and all of that? Or are you still out there, working to JV with people or teach them how to, kind of do what you've done? Yeah, I'm going to still buy. I think it's always a good time to buy if you buy right. I'm not a syndicator. I'm not going to go out there and actively raise capital for deals. I think that partnering with the right partner on certain deals makes sense. Last year, I lent out a lot of money because I wanted to stay liquid, but still get a return on my money. So I lent money out to investors that I know, like, and trust, who are in deals. I put money into, not as an LP, but I put my money in as a general partner to types of deals that I wouldn't want to do on my own. So, for instance, my buddy bought a 47-unit property in Oklahoma City. I'm part owner on that. I don't want to rehab 47 units in Oklahoma City. I don't have a team in Oklahoma City, but he does. He has that skill set. He has that team. So I can be involved in that deal without actively being involved in that deal, but I'm still going in as a general partner. Going forward, I will probably sell a few more of my properties and really just focus outside of mobile home park spaces on the triple net commercial stuff. Yeah, so that actually leads into a question. They said, do you cycle your properties every so often, or just hold as long as possible? Yeah, I never buy a property with the intention to sell it. I always buy a property to everything I buy, I plan to hold forever, but I don't always hold it forever. And so
I sold 13 units last year. I seller financed it for someone. I did a no money down seller finance deal for them. It's 4 properties with 13 units on it. So I sell when it makes sense. So why did it make sense for these ones? Well, I looked at my portfolio. I knew over the next several years, these were going to have some deferred maintenance. They were just old properties. For me to maximize rent on those properties would have required a lot of money, a lot of capital to go in there and clean them up. That wasn't the best use of my capital. I had already built a lot of equity in these properties. My best use was and I didn't need the down payment. So there was a couple that I know, liked, and trust. They have a skill set to go in there and clean it up, right? And so with that deal, they gave me the price I wanted. I remember I said people are interested in price, down payment, or interest rate. They gave me the price I wanted. They said, hey, we're gonna offer you no money down. I think they were really, I think they were like nervous about it. And in my mind, I'm reading their offer going, hell yeah, they're smart. This is a really smart offer to give me on these particular deals. They're giving me the price I want. I'm gonna give them terms that work for them. And I know and trust that they're gonna go in there, put their money in there and clean them up. And that's exactly what they've done. And the reason I sold it is because I have a strong equity position. I don't need the cash now. So when they do cash me out, I'll go take that money and put it into something much larger. And it's going to be a win for them. I mean, I think that deal alone will probably make millionaires out of them. I mean, it's 13 units. It's near downtown. They're doing phenomenal. They're doubling the rent on some of these because he has the skill set to go in there, clean them up, maximize rent. That's not my best use of time or energy or money.
Okay. Yeah, another question. Lance asks, how many hours a week do you work?
A couple.
Prior service, I could, probably just keeps on going.
No, I don't work very much. There's nothing on my plate. There's nothing on my plate that I don't put on my plate. I don't manage any of my properties. It's all third-party property management. Sometimes if I'm in the middle of a like refi or something, or it takes a little more time, but I'm really conscious of my time. I really try to spend most of my time hanging with my family, hanging out with cool people, doing cool shit, traveling. And so I really make sure that I don't take anything on that takes me away from those things that are actually most important in my life. I watch a lot of business owners and even real estate investors get into investing because they want the freedom of time, and they end up doing a lot of stuff. And maybe initially, you need to, but they end up doing a lot of stuff that actually takes them away from the reason they got into real estate investing in the first place, was to own their time. I mean, I've met nobody that wants to be financially free because they want to swim in a pile of money. It's usually comes down to they want to own their time and have the freedom to do whatever the hell they want. And so I just make sure that, I guess to answer your question, I don't work very much. And if I am working on something, it never does feel like work.
I love that, man. Yeah. And we had somebody, Justin, ask, what's your favorite value adds?
My favorite value adds, I mean, in the mobile home park space, it's the easiest because it's poorly managed, unrented, right? And so that's the easy type of value add. Like I mentioned, that first park, I mean, rents hadn't been increased in 4.5 years. Utilities weren't being built back. That's just the easiest value add. It's not requiring a bunch of money or labor or big expensive renovation projects. That's my favorite. Finding undervalued real estate. Now, for some people, maybe it is like the people that bought those 13 units from me. The value add for them was I wasn't going to spend my time, energy, and money, nor do I have the skill set to go fix up a property. It would probably look worse when I got done with it, but they do. So for them, the value add is like they can go in there and really make these things nice and maximize rent. So it's not the same for everybody. For me, it's the under rented and poorly managed.
And somebody asked, did you ever self-manage? And if so, when did you stop?
Yep, I did self-manage. 17 units is when I stopped. So I remember very clearly, it was an upstairs unit in the Whitaker in Eugene. It's 10 o'clock at night. I have young kids at home. I have a newborn at home and a 2-year-old at home at the time. And I'm trying to fix this toilet of a home that's like 100 years old. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. There's like water everywhere. And then I had to call a plumber anyway. And I'm like, gosh, I'm spending my time, I'm spending my money, and I suck at this. I like putting deals together. I'm good at putting deals together. I'm not a good property manager. And so that was like the moment that I decided I need to turn everything over to property management. As soon as I turned my properties over to property management, I just focused on buying more deals. I let them do what they're good at, and I buy deals. My property managers are the hugest asset to my team, and they're not even, other than I have one employee that runs an RV park campground that I have. Dylan, I see you on here. I know you know who Aubrey is. You've met Aubrey. But outside of that guy who runs that park, it's all third-party property management. They are better at managing property than I am. They're good at what they do, and I'm happy to pay them to do that so I can focus on the big picture stuff.
100%. Yeah. So Justin also asked, how do you structure your mobile home parks? Do you rent or do you sell or finance the homes to people?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, in an ideal scenario, I want to own none of the homes. And, that being said, oftentimes when you buy a park, you end up owning some of the homes. A lot of my parks have stick-built structures on it. Some have apartments, some have single-family homes and stuff on the property. Those you end up owning. But my best parks are the ones where I own none of the homes. The tenants, that way, I mean, you can really decrease the expense ratio because there is no maintenance and repair on anything in the home. You're responsible for all the infrastructure, all the main plumbing, electric, sewer, that kind of thing. So you get the expense ratio down pretty low. So in an ideal world, I own none of the homes. The tenants own their home and they're just paying space rent. And then if you get good tenants, they're pride of ownership, right? So I've sold, when I end up buying a property and there is park-owned homes, I'll sell those back to a tenant usually, and I'll sell them for cash. And if they don't have cash, then I'll seller finance it to them. I've only seller financed, I think, one, and every other one has been cash. And I never, and then to that point, I also never put a value on the homes when I'm analyzing a mobile home park. So, I sold a home the other day, a mobile for $45,000. I put no value on that home when I bought the park. So a lot of times when I'm underwriting, I'm not putting a value on them, and then you're selling. I sold one for $18,000, one for $12,000, one for $42,000. It's free money. I'm not putting any value in those.
Interesting. Yeah. So I've also heard, I guess lately the USDA is doing these kind of zero down. If you find land and you section all the land off, they're doing these like zero down. Mobile home or manufactured home loans. You think of anything, I guess, in terms of that, like maybe you own the home and then they do like a zero down USDA loan on it, and then you could maybe recycle that land, once they're done with it.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about that, and I haven't done a lot of infill stuff with bringing in newer homes. A lot of the older homes would be pretty hard to finance. So a lot of times when I'm buying a park, I'm buying it with, even though they're tenant-owned homes, it might be 30 homes and they're all built between 1960 and 1985 or something, right?
Yeah,
Those are going to be hard to finance. Some of the newer ones, there is financing available. I mean, there used to not be a lot of financing available for mobile home parks or for mobile homes. And then the last couple of years, it's been very interesting because even mobile homes have appreciated in value, right? So which is weird. You always think, oh, they depreciate. They've always depreciated. Another reason why I put no value on them. But then we've had this, hyperinflation where everything's gone up in value that you can imagine going up in value.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So if you took anything, I guess in everything that you've done, man, and it is a tremendous amount. You're extremely accomplished, and we appreciate all the value that you're bringing. But in everything that you've done, as you kind of look back, what do you feel like your military service gave you to be able to do what you do now?
Yeah, I think the military made me realize I didn't want a boss. I didn't want someone telling me what to do. That was part of it. It's I don't know. I mean, I was young. I joined the Army National Guard at 17, got deployed at 20. I just saw real quickly, like, I wanted to be in control of my life, and that didn't matter if it was meaning not being in the military or not having a job. I wanted to have more freedom in my life, and I think time freedom can mean different things to different people. But to me, having that financial freedom and having that time freedom just gives you more choices in life. I mean, having that time freedom might look very different to you than it does to me or to Lance or to whoever else, but it's really the ability to do whatever the hell you want with your time. I mean, I'm not going to spend, every day sitting watching Netflix, but if that's why if that motivates someone to have all the time freedom in the world, then great. If it's for me, it's travel. And again, hanging out with my family, being able to work out in the middle of the day. But it just comes down to freedom and more choices more than anything.
Yeah.
I don't know if that
100%.
really answered your question about the military. I mean, I think high school wrestling gave me more, I think that high school wrestling probably influenced the way I took on real estate investing more than the military.
Yeah, man. I wrestled as well, and I think it definitely gives you a drive. That's
For
for
sure.
sure.
For sure.
Yeah, man. So, I want to be respectful of your time, but, probably just in speaking to that, like my why is also my family. I want to be able to hang out with my family. I think it's important everybody finds their why. It's what drives them, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think also making sure that the activities you're doing, the things that you're putting in your life align with that why too. I see a lot of people that say, oh, this is the most important thing to me, but then they're taking on things that don't actually align with their why. So one thing that helped me a lot is I got really clear on just those couple things that are most important to me. Then it got way easier to say, you know what, me starting a property management company does not actually align with my why. Me syndicating deals doesn't align with my why. That might for somebody else. But the clearer you are on why you're doing what you're doing, the easier it is to say yes and no to things.
Very cool, man. So really the last question I have, if you had to go back and do it all over again and you were just starting out and, really didn't have any knowledge, how would you get started? How would you zone yourself in and get laser focused so that you could go get that first deal?
It's relationships. I mean, I can't say that enough. Go build relationships. I mean, there are a few people on this call, Lance, Dylan, Kyle, who I had breakfast with this morning. They just reached out to me, said, hey, heard you on the podcast. Like, let's get together. I mean, you never know where those relationships are going to go, but the more relationships you can build, the more opportunities there's going to be, and specific to investing in real estate, there's not one right way. Like there's a lot of different ways to invest in real estate. So like my way isn't the only way. It's not the best way. It's just the way I've done it, but I know very few people who have found success investing in real estate that didn't have some aspect of building relationships in that formula.
Cool. Hey man, just for you, how can everybody get a hold of you? How can they reach out? Facebook, Instagram?
Instagram's the best way.
Yeah.
Just my name, Gabriel. You'll find me, Gabriel Hamel, Gabriel R. Hamel. You'll find me on Instagram.
Awesome, man. Yeah, Gabe, I can't thank you enough. I truly appreciate it. And hopefully we can stay in contact. I'd love to talk to you about that deal in Houston and see what you think about it. Yeah,
absolutely. Anyone on this call, I mean, I'm happy to help. Like, to me, one of the most rewarding things is just watching people go after their dreams and go for it. So like, that's one of the most exciting things for me is when someone messages me and say, hey, I quit my W-2 or did my first seller finance deal, or anyone on this call, like, you come across a deal and you're like, oh shit, they want to seller finance it. What do I do? Or I'm happy to help. I'm happy to help where I can. I love that stuff.
Gabe, thanks so much, man. We really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
All
Lance,
right.
thanks for inviting me on, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Lance.
Thanks, bro.
Awesome, Gabe. We really appreciate it, man. Have a good one.
Likewise. Thanks, guys.
Bye. All right, man. Everybody in the group.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So I'll kind of unmute everybody here. We'll turn it off. So yeah, we truly appreciate everybody coming, man. Unbelievable. There's so much content in that. I love to get everybody's perspective about how they got started, where they're at, how they're doing it, because it seems like everybody I come across has a different way of doing it. Got to do this major underwrite, got to do that. And is he probably doing that? Sure. But he didn't start out that way. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what I love about you, Lance. You just go after it, man. You guys, yeah, it's like a superpower, man. You guys are just able to go out there and go after it. I think that's something that I could learn more from you about, right? Because that's not my superpower. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Appreciate that,
cool.
man. Yeah. Gabe is kind of one of the guys I looked up to. I mean, obviously, I reached out to him about 5 years ago. I heard him on Bigger Pockets and I reached out to him and he agreed to sit down with me for coffee. I'm a pretty driven individual and I knew that was a golden opportunity for me, and so I wanted to just to see if he would. And he rolls up in this, Porsche. And I was like, dang, this guy has got it made, like, I was just like, dude, that's my dream car. And so he was just super humble, super cool, man. Really simple life strategy, I kind of, in a way, kind of mimic what he did, not even like intentionally, but that's just kind of my jam. That's who I am too. I love building relationships and connecting. So it's pretty cool to hear a story over, no matter how many times I hear it. I've heard it several times now, and it is pretty inspiring, to hear how simplistic he makes it. It's not super complicated. It's building those relationships, getting in networks, getting in groups like these, for a lot of us, that's kind of how we can get things rolling. So
yeah, 100%, man. And I stress that to everybody. I don't know everything, not by a long shot. I'm constantly trying to teach myself and surround myself with people that know more. And I think that groups like this are super important. I think people come into the group and they want to just, instant make it happen. And, we try to tell people it's hard work. It's hard work to get from point A to point Z, and you got to put time in, and you got to come in the group, and, you got to be active. And much like you guys, the Odessa deal, we've got to look at it, and maybe we look at it the first time and we might have to look at it 15 times after that,
right.
Who knows? But I think
Yes.
it's about sharing time and being able to interact with one another to get that deal to the finish line if it's possible.
Yeah, and I just wanted to thank you too, man, for taking your time and spending it with us, man. Like we haven't really gotten to know each other on a personal level like I'd like to, but
we're gonna, man. I'm just
Yeah.
waiting for you
I
guys
can't wait to
make
hear
that
your
drive
story.
to Houston.
Yeah,
or me to
dude.
go to Tyler. One
Yeah,
of the two.
right. Or like with our grandson, we meet halfway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, once again, man, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Lance for making that happen, and just convey to everybody on this channel, in this group, that is the intent, to bring value to each other, to bring value to everyone, to keep having people on that know more than us so that we can learn. And all I say is get out there and take action, guys. It's the only way to do it, man. All right,
That's right.
guys, we really appreciate everybody coming. I hope that it brought value to everybody today, and we'll call it a call.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.